Now, I would like to move on to the final session, which will give us critical insights into a wealth of experience and the priorities of stakeholders dedicating themselves to the sustainable recovery from the pandemic. Mr. Muñoz will be chairing this session. Before I hand over to Gonzalo, as we are running behind the schedule, I'd first like to hear from British Minister Qualten, who has to leave our meeting shortly. Minister Qualten, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Minister Koizumi. I want to start by thanking you, Minister Koizumi, for organizing this really remarkable discussion. And I'd also like to thank all the other participants as well. This event has demonstrated the passion that we all share for meeting our Paris goals and the benefits for coming together, sharing our experiences, and working towards a common purpose. This all gives me and the United Kingdom great confidence for COP26 next year. We can all see that as we recover from the coronavirus pandemic, we have a huge opportunity to build back better, to build our recovery on a fairer, greener, cleaner, and more resilient economy. And that is the agenda that we will be putting at the heart of our COP26 presidency next year. The COP president designate outlined our progress to date on clean growth in his remarks. So I would like, briefly, if I can, to focus on what comes next. Here in the UK, there are almost 500,000 jobs in low-carbon businesses and their supply chains. And there is a real potential to use our recovery to create even more jobs in this area. So in this summer economic statement, our Chancellor announced £3 billion to support measures to reduce greenhouse emissions from buildings, supporting as many as 140,000 green jobs. We're committed to spending even more money, more than £2 billion to the industrial sector over 8 years to help them reduce emissions and energy bills. And as we're committing hundreds of millions of pounds to developing new technologies to help decarbonize other processes, we're interested in developing direct air capture, which takes CO2 emissions immediately out of the air around us. We're committed also to carbon capture, usage and storage, which we aim to start deploying by the middle of this decade. And we want to be able to share our findings and collaborate with other partners and friends across the world. Projects like these allow us to move rapidly towards a decarbonized economy. And this, of course, is vital if we are to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. And I think also that all of this work can pave the way for more ambitious, nationally defined contributions in the fight against climate change. So that is our priority for COVID recovery and the vision behind our economic policies and the COP presidency, which we very much look forward to next year. I'm delighted to have heard lots of different examples and similar examples from so many countries here today. It is vitally important that all our nations build on the ideas that we're sharing today, and that we actually challenge ourselves to submit more ambitious nationally determined contributions and strategies, longer-term strategies, to set the path to net zero ahead of COP26 next year. The UK, as many people know, has committed in law to being net zero by 2050. I hope other nations can join us on this journey and make a similar commitment. Thank you once again, Minister Koizumi, for this excellent forum, for bringing all of this together. And I look forward to supporting all of your efforts as participants ahead of COP26 next year. And I hope we can all work together as we are doing for an ambitious and clean recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister, for your strong message. I am counting on you and the UK's leadership for the success of COP26. Now, Gonzalo, over to you.
Konbanwa, Koizumi Dayin,
Konbanwa.
and good afternoon, Patricia. Thank you, Minister, for the warm introduction. As you have all noted, the success of the policy responses intended by governments will depend very much on the extent to which they drive action by all of society. We all understand that the challenge of transition and system redesign is much greater than the challenge of incremental change and system improvement. But the impact can, of course, be much greater and, in fact, is essential for the full implementation of the Paris Agreement. Critical for the success in this effort is inclusiveness, broad participation, and co-design of the redesign. With this in mind, I am really honored to introduce an excellent panel to present the views of non-party stakeholders on co-design better and more resilient socio-economic systems. I am here joined for this session by Paul Polman, Sharan Burrow, and Kobie Brand. Paul is the Honorary Chair of International Chamber of Commerce and is the co-founder of Imagine. Paul was CEO of Unilever from 2019 until January 2009 until January 2019. Sharan is the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation. He has also served as a member of the governing body of the International Labour Organization and a member of the Stakeholder Council of the Global Reporting Initiative. And Kobie is the head of ICLEI Africa, responsible for member cities and associations in over 27 African countries across sub-Saharan Africa. She also serves as the global director for ICLEI's biodiversity and nature-based solutions work. Thank you to the three of you for joining today. In launching this online platform, Minister Koizumi has made a distinction between the responses and the recovery phases of the pandemic, as well as the long-term redesign. We can turn to some specific elements of redesign shortly, but first, I would appreciate your views on the current approaches to recovery. You've all been involved and observed many approaches to recovery across the world in recent months. What do you consider to have been the most effective approaches to enabling an all-of-society approach? And how can this inform policy making on climate change? Paul, perhaps you can start?
Well, first of all, thanks, Gonzalo, for the opportunity, and thanks, Minister Koizumi, once more, and Erwin for the wonderful session before. The first thing I want to say is it's very encouraging to hear all the countries making their commitments for sticking to the Paris Agreement. But the reality is the numbers in aggregate don't add up. Even before COVID, we were projecting 3.5 degree warming. Gender equality would have taken us 257 years. Income inequality was actually going in the wrong direction. So we have our jobs cut out. And it is important, first and foremost, to stress the importance of closing the say-do gap. There are a lot of promises out there for 2050, but we don't live in 2050, nor can we wait for actions to 2050. So we need to be sure, if we want to be successful, that the actions we take now start showing progress already in 2030 and onwards. And that means being science-based, something that is missing in many political environments around the world. And I apologize for being so direct, but the countries and the recovery efforts that do better are science-based. It also means putting people at the center of what we do. The ILO estimates over 300 million equivalent job hours are being lost, and we need to put that job creation back at the center to avoid further issues of social cohesion. It also means investing in our SMEs. The SMEs are 80–90% in some countries more of our global economies. And unfortunately, they're in a very fragile situation right now, much more than the bigger companies that are often mentioned as example. And last but not least, where we do better is where we have global cooperation, where we don't try to solve many of these global issues now, from financial markets to decarbonization, to cybersecurity, to the virus itself right now, to the recovery. We do need to find a way to better work together. If these conditions are met, we'll have a successful recovery. Where we are today, it's very important to point out that in 2007, 2008, with the financial crisis, we missed the boat. Only 2.5% of our spending went to improving our societies or greening them, if you want to. We ended up with more income disparity. We ended up with accelerated climate change. Under the current environment, we only see at the moment about 30% of our spending going in that greener direction. And yet study after study after study shows that if we want to have job creation and we want the jobs to be more jobs and more resilient jobs and better paying jobs, it leads to retrofitting of buildings, investing in new mobility system, greening our electricity, changing the way we deal with our natural resources, investing in R&D and education. So I hope that the industries and the companies that take that to heart will be doing better. But I hope that ultimately we can force these partnerships with the governments that are listening to drive these transformative changes, not by making, anecdotal suggestions of what everybody individually is doing, but by really having it grounded in science so that the numbers at the end add up. And that is the task that we have in front of us. What is very clear is that the private sector is moving because the ESG, environmental, social, and governance over this COVID period has shown to be more resilient, better performance. You see more companies now making commitments around climate, more companies understanding the S or social aspect of ESG, but we also need to ensure that we work closely with governments to align the policies and the frameworks in which we operate, which frankly, in many cases still drive us to different outcomes than we really want.
Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you for being that direct. Sharan, I would expect that you can be also very direct with your answer. Please, the floor is yours.
So Paul has outlined the ambition, and thanks again for the invite. But we know that if we don't stabilize the planet within 5 to 10 years, then the links between planetary and human health already made clear. Before that, the inequality that was driving despair, anger, a lack of trust in our democracies, all of these things will get worse. And inequality was about income, absolutely, but it's also about race and gender. If we can't use this convergence of crisis to learn from our mistakes, as Paul said, and to build a better future, building not just building back, but building a different and better future, then we're not serious. And the global shocks, whether it's extreme climate events, whether it's disaffected people, and that anger will grow, whether it's in fact indeed more health conflict or global economic shocks, which will be created by all of these factors potentially, this will simply continue to escalate. So it will take all of us, and it will take an approach to recovery this time that's also about resilience. It's about inclusiveness, but it's also about resilience. And it has to have a sustainability framework, a net zero economy, a respect for nature and nature-based solutions, a respect for people everywhere, as Paul said, which is why for us, just transition is critical. I was really disappointed. I know they only had 2 minutes, but there were only about 10 ministers by my count who mentioned the social dimensions, including jobs. We're in a jobs crisis we've never had before, not even back in the 30s. This is so tragic. We have 1.6 billion people in the informal economy facing destitution every day. 300 to 400 million jobs already lost, and a depression facing us on a global scale, as I said, not since the 30s. And you add that on the decline in income share for working people on the front lines, the absolute, impact of a lack of health and safety regulation. And we have people who feel like they've just been left behind. So just transition, the social dimension, just transition didn't feature once. Now I know it's a language piece, but it says to workers and to employers and to communities all around the world, you do matter. You will be co-designers. And frankly, Gonzalo, if we don't get this right, we can't build the trust in a very different and very radically different future. We know that the fossil fuel era is over. If anybody can talk about the pain of that, we can as workers, because they're good jobs, great industries, but it's over. We have to build jobs on a living planet that will be inclusive, full employment for all, goal 8 of the SDGs, but a recognition that our systems, including our labour markets, are simply breaking down around us. All of us, investment, and my last point is not just investment in jobs, but investment in social protection. And what we've seen to date on both the jobs front, jobs for inclusive, futures, is that many of the countries have protected their workers and business, not all, but many, in a commendable way, with their unions, with employers. But when it looks to global cooperation, it's very thin. So if we can't build a global social protection fund for our most vulnerable, if we can't help by sharing technology, and I know some governments are committed to doing that, but we need everybody on the trail, and that means global cooperation, as Paul said, but it also means talking to the people, the employers, the workers at the local level. So that's the challenge. If we want to get the transition rapid, deep, fast, we want to see COP reach the ambition next year that we need, we've got to be in it together, and it will take painful, difficult dialogue and commitment. Interdependent, all of us at the table.
Thanks so much, Sharan. Totally agree on the need of building resilience with not only the financial sector, but with the increase of jobs, greener jobs, but also most of them through SMEs. So, Kobie, I believe that there have been so many aspects that brings us to the subnational governments. What would be your response to the question?
Well, firstly, Gonzalo, please just allow me to say that this has been such an enriching and inspiring session this afternoon. And I want to just start very briefly by congratulating Minister Koizumi for this fantastic initiative. Redesign 2020 is something about redesigning. It's not just recovering. So it's opening up a new world of possibilities of looking at a longer term, decades long commitment from this whole of government, whole of society approach that we see here today in action. And I just want to say that it is fantastic to see Japan again taking the lead with UNFCCC. Japan has shown so much leadership in terms of areas like net zero cities. We've shown with Japan that net zero cities are possible, achievable. The Aichi biodiversity targets come from Japan. The Nagoya Action Plan for Subnational Governments from Japan. Implementation of SDGs at the national and local levels, as well as your commitment to the new urban deal. And now you bring this to the world. So hats off. And we want to, on behalf of ICLEI, on behalf of our subnational community, say that we are willing to work with you in localizing this platform, this new Redesign 2020 initiative across our sectors with cities and subnational governments around the world. So if I can just say thank you very much to that, and we're looking forward to our daring cities to be the first platform to do that. And then coming to Africa, from an African perspective, we're looking at, in an African context, at an already stretched situation on the ground with our cities and local governments. And what we saw with the pandemic and the epidemics coming into Africa is that it certainly hits at the city level. We will soon be talking to the first epicenter in Africa, the city of Cape Town and the government of the Western Cape in their response. And what we saw was working here, and we still were living through this on a daily basis, is that multi-level governance is absolutely key. And it was so wonderful to hear so many parties today speaking about the inclusiveness and the approaches they have towards cities, to hear them, to listen to them, to work with them, and to enable cities. So big lesson learned, multi-level governance is absolutely key in addressing these type of situations. And we already know that when urbanization is taking place at a rapid and unprecedented pace in sub-Saharan Africa, that it is those communities those poor communities in our urban growing areas that are worst hit and already very directly affected by climate change. So it does not need much to push them over the edge. Inequalities have shown up, the cracks have shown up through this pandemic, and it's up to us to make sure that we address it as a whole of society approach, work on these inequalities, and actually look forward to not only building back better, but building back better in an inclusive way and in a green way, which focuses on nature-based solutions as well as part of the equation.
Thanks so much, Kobie. Knowledge of the time that we have, I would like to go through each of you with a concrete question. If you can then be very precise on and use the shortest possible time with it. So I'll go first with you, Paul, to go deeper on circular economy approaches that can significantly enhance resources efficiency and reduce emissions.
Well, our current economic system was designed when money was scarce and materials were abundant. Now we have a scarcity of materials and abundance of capital. And that is really where it boils down to. Earth's Overshoot Day was August 22nd, I believe, this year. So we're continuously using far more resources than the world can replenish. Whilst the circular economy, i.e. recuperating what we've used, is a right way of thinking of it, it's simply not enough anymore. We now need to go to a regenerative economy. You see many of the companies, Microsoft being one of them, saying, hey, I don't only want to offset my carbon emission moving forward to be a net zero emitter, I actually want to be net positive and recuperate what we have emitted since we started. So we very much need to move from a circular thinking actually to a regenerative thinking. The European Green Deal starts to get there. It's a $1 trillion economic opportunity. Everywhere we look at, it just makes good economic sense. Many businesses are starting to internalize that. H&M has a very good business in recycling clothes. Philips does the same with lighting. We're seeing people looking at regenerative agriculture to make that carbon positive versus carbon negative. And that is very much the direction we need to push our global economies if we want to have it be more resilient. And it gets to what Kobie also called the nature-based solutions is obviously a big part of thinking regenerative. Otherwise, we simply don't get there. Nature-based solutions is, and I'll stop there, is about 30% of the climate solutions that we have. It also happens to be one of the most cost-effective solutions. It also happens to be a solution that actually is very good for job creation. So that's why that circular economy plus a little bit more is how I would end.
Thanks so much, Paul. Sharan, would love to hear from you regarding inequality, right? What lessons have you drawn from the current response and recovery packages that should inform more comprehensive redesign policies in the coming years regarding the socioeconomic system and inequality, please?
So we already have a global consensus on what it will take to make the world a more equal and more just way. The ILO has in fact established now over 100 years ago an understanding that if you don't have a stable social floor of rights, if we don't govern our workplaces and our communities effectively, then in fact people will fall through the cracks. We now have a labour market that's in absolute dire trouble, 40% only in the formal sector, a third of those actually in precarious work, 60% in a sector of desperation, no rule of law, no minimum wage, no hope, basically, no social protection. So we have to rebuild the social contract. We call it a time for a new social contract, Goal 8 of the SDGs, the ILO Centenary Declaration. We map out the kind of rights married with social protection that in fact, and the income base that all workers, irrespective of employment environment, should have. That has to be at the centre. We also need a transformative agenda for women. On every indicator, progress for women has stalled, And we need just transition for climate, for sure, but also for technology. The opportunities and the threats of technology are enormous. And if we've seen anything in this lockdown, it's the threat to business, to workers, and to our very basic understanding of privacy, of the rapid growth and the raging profits that keep escalating for the big tech companies. So in recovery, I would say to you, those are the elements. If you're going to really have a more equal world, you have to have a floor of understanding that all workers are entitled to rights and community. We have to put a fair competition floor, not just of rights, but environmental standards under the global trading model. But we have to actually also marry this with social protection. 70% of the world's people have no social protection, no resilience against shocks at all. As governments withdraw their support packages, even for workers in the formal economy, we're going to see incredible destitution on top of the 1.6 billion people already facing them. So we need to share our wealth. What's the point of making profits, growing wealth, if we don't share it? But we have to do that in a set of regulatory frameworks with science-based underpinnings, as Paul said in the first intervention, that actually go to building a net zero economy. There are no jobs on a dead planet. We have to build jobs and put the social supports for all people around those communities in place in a sustainable future.
Thanks so much, Sharan. Kobie, speaking about decentralization, how do you consider that cooperation and coordination between different layers of government can be enhanced to drive greater and more ambitious climate action?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I want to second everything that Paul and Sharan have said. But coming back to the issue of multi-level governance, just digging a little bit deeper, I think what is needed, what we see is needed in certainly the global south and many parts of the world actually, is that there needs to be a clearer definition of what the mandates are and what mandates are best fulfilled at the local and subnational level. So clarification of those mandates, making them stronger, making them clearer, and then enabling local and subnational governments to take up these agendas are absolutely essential, not only for the recovery and redesign of our post-COVID world, but also for the attainment of the SDGs, all of them, in fact, because they're all interlinked. So clarification of mandates, and then with that, of course, comes finance. There's still a need to unlock finance mechanisms in countries within fiscus in a national level, but also in the donor community and FDI processes, etc., that we could look at ways where cities and subnational governments can access financing more directly. They often very much know what is needed in their own cities and towns, but accessing that finance is not possible. So we hear there's a lot of money out there, but assisting cities and supporting cities in new blended finance mechanisms that are actually accessible to them and manageable to them is going to be vital in any recovery and certainly in the redesign. So we see that cities are almost like an ecosystem and they can be regenerative. We can actually be regenerative at the local level, as Paul alluded to, and city by city, we can actually be an example for a whole national recovery process as well. We've seen it happen in the past, and we can see it mushrooming from this process again. Our colleagues out in the field, our mayors, are desperate for collaboration with each other, but they are also desperate for finding options for easy finance and access to that financing in a way that builds inclusive economies. And if I can just say one last point, is that we have in cities, the majority of people already live in cities, but we have a massive capital that is not tapped into, and that is that of urban communities, those of us who live in cities. We are a formidable force together that can drive change, and we've seen it happen. During lockdowns, during hard lockdowns, you see a complete city all citizens coming together and adhering to those lockdown regulations. We saw it in Cape Town at the time of drought. We actually moved away from the day zero scenario where all taps would run dry. And that behavioral change is still manifested today in the lives of people living in Cape Town. So rapid behavioral change is possible, not only in the wake of a crisis, but also if there is a social compact together with government, a whole of society approach to actually change for a better world. And at the bottom line of all of that means humanity must restore its relationship with the planet. And as Sharan said, if that is not fundamental to everything and anything we do here, that is, our efforts are going to not be sustainable, and that is not going to get us to the world we need to get to. We're looking forward to the climate COP next year, and the net zero ambition there is absolutely fantastic. And I think we need to have the same level of ambition for when we talk about biodiversity, with a big year for biodiversity coming up next year as well, but also for linking health fundamentally now to all these global agendas, water, everything. It is so interlinked, and when people come knocking at the mayor's door, they do not see this agenda separate from that agenda. They see their lives, and we as governments are responsible collectively at all levels to create a better and inclusive life for every urban citizen in this world, where they can thrive economically, socially connected, but also in an environmentally safe and responsible way. So let us not turn this golden opportunity coming out of the most tragic and horrific pandemic that we are facing right now. Let us not use this opportunity lightly. Let us make the most of this opportunity. And again, Japan and the UNFCCC with IGES and others are giving us an opportunity with this platform. We are absolutely very enthusiastic to be part of this. And I want to just say hats off to Mary Robinson and Vera Songwe in their opening remarks. Absolutely. Honorable Mary Robinson, if you ever want to join the subnational community, we'll welcome you with open arms. You're a young lady still, and we need voices like you. We need people like you to show and make true the realization of the full potential of cities and subnational governments as their contributions to the global change we all need and want. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kobie. Thanks the three of you. Unfortunately, we don't have much time to continue with this, I believe, absolutely fundamental conversation. It's been a pleasure to listen to the extent of concrete messages, learnings, and commitments to really enhance the scale of collaboration in building back better. Thanks, Paul, Sharan, Kobie, for joining and for your fundamental words. Before closing, we would like to present some video messages from stakeholders in Japan, specifically from the city of Yokohama and the Japanese youth.
Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am Hayashi Fumiko, Mayor of Yokohama, Japan. It is my great honor to take part in this meeting. I wish to express my sincere gratitude to His Excellency, Mr. Koizumi Shinjiro, Minister of the Environment of Japan, and to Her Excellency, Ms. Patricia Espinosa, Executive Secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. I would also like to thank ICLEI for arranging this occasion. Selected as an SDGs future city, Yokohama has announced Zero Carbon Yokohama, a vision to achieve by 2050. To realize the goal, we are partnering with 12 cities from regions over 700 kilometers away to use renewable energy they generate in Yokohama. In addition, in cooperation with 34 companies in IT and other fields, we have been steadily implementing the Yokohama Smart City project. Across 15 sub-projects, including energy management systems, we achieved a 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Due to climate change, the risk of natural disasters increasing year by year. It is said that about half of the world's population lives in cities today. As a representative of city leadership, I will take practical action to address climate change and COVID-19. Ladies and gentlemen, let all of us work together to hand down a sustainable world to the generation of our children and grandchildren. Thank you.
Concentrated rain, drought, melted ice, bushfire crisis. These disasters are threatening Earth systems, biodiversity, our lives. Then, what have we done against these critical situations? 5 years ago, the Paris Agreement and Agenda 2030 was agreed by world leaders, movements between civil society, including youth, and individuals' actions taking places around the world. However, COVID-19 pandemic caused chaotic situation, which stopped international cooperation to fight against climate change. Now, we are responsible to ensure that the post-COVID recovery and transformation integrates inclusiveness with climates and biodiversity.
I'm from Nigeria.
From Hargeisa, Somaliland.
I'm from the United Kingdom.
From Bangladesh.
From Kampala, Uganda.
Philippines.
I'm from Sydney, Australia.
I'm in Singapore.
I'm from Algeria.
Japan.
From Democratic Republic of Congo.
From Zurich, Switzerland.
From New Delhi, India.
Pakistan.
Climate action is a crucial problem in today's world, which is affecting every nation, every continent.
Deforestation contributes significantly to carbon dioxide emissions, yet it continues to happen unregulated.
Where we are having flooding of immense proportion in Sierra Leone, in Liberia, in Nigeria, in Cameroon.
Young people are taken seriously in decision making.
And we consider climate change not an issue on the side or periphery of economics.
It will not be possible to create a decentralized and clean society if we miss the moment where our social system is in need of major change.
We strongly hope that the right choices will be made now.
If states across the world continue to let climate change go unchecked, the negative effects will become more extreme and more frequent.
The situation demands an immediate action.
We are in the run-up to 2030, with much still to be addressed.
I want all the countries of the world to come forward in achieving SDG 13 and speak for climate action.
COVID-19 gives people an opportunity to transform our society into a more inclusive and resilient.
To issue climate emergency declaration and move to make the post-corona world sustainable.
We come up with eco-friendly laws and policies.
Is to have a standard reporting and accounting of climate positive or climate negative.
Toxic emission needs to be controlled.
Prioritize green energy in COVID-19 economics responses by committing to green stimulus package.
To appreciate the benefit of renewable energy based on scientific evidence.
Subsidize the green sector, invest in the green sector, let the green sector thrive.
We should start to discuss the relationship between human activities and nature to build a truly sustainable lifestyle.
So we need policy collaborating between climate change and biodiversity field and doesn't destroy nature.
Implement policies to transform our food systems as it's the #1 solution to the climate crisis.
We have technologies that will be solutions for climate change. If people have enough money, they will choose green energy.
The leaders to commit to year-long capacity building opportunities, especially for the young people from Global South.
Climate change is a problem, and if we don't fix it now, we won't have a future.
To stand up to fight against climate change.
So now is the time to engage all the stakeholders.
Let us work together in this partnership.
Let's fight against COVID. Let's work together to save our planet.
That is the future of generations of today and the future of the planet.
We can climate change more urgent.
Great then. So taking the floor again, as a high-level champion for climate action from Chile, I feel that we have heard in all the sessions that today provides an enormous opportunity to build deeper collaboration towards early decarbonization, towards much greener resource efficiency, and towards ensuring that decisions can be taken in as close connection as possible with the lived reality of citizens. I am hugely motivated to work with my fellow and friend Nigel, the UN high-level climate champion from UK, to ensure that we deliver these partnerships and this impact as part of the success that the global community needs and expects to see at COP26. Thank you again, Minister Koizumi, for launching this initiative and creating space for the broad range of perspective. I know that we will see a short video from the incoming pre-COP presidency from Italy, but I'll announce that as I pass the floor back to you as the chair. Arigato goisamashita, over to you.
I wish to thank the Japanese government for launching this important initiative that will certainly be a useful tool to assist countries in coordinating their policies and measures to recover from COVID-19. The health emergency has made clear to us that it is necessary to rebuild our societies and our economies, focusing on protecting the environment, fighting climate change, and restoring biodiversity. All over the world, a huge construction site has been opened. We can choose if we want to start again from where we left, or if we want, altogether, make a great leap forward towards sustainability, climate neutrality, and resilience, leaving no one behind. In Italy and in Europe, we have chosen this second option. The actions foreseen by the European Recovery Plan represent the opportunity to put forward the strategy already defined by the Green Deal. Italy is rapidly moving in this direction, launching a number of reforms and introducing significant policies and measures to promote the recovery. We have already introduced a tax deduction covering up to 110% of the expenses for energy renovation works in private buildings, and we have allocated 210 million euros to make urban mobility more sustainable, including incentives for purchasing bicycles and electric vehicles. It is only the beginning of a larger plan aiming at shaping the future of our economy. And we want to look ahead towards the future. This is why we put young people and their voice at the center. Since the Youth Climate Summit held 1 year ago, promoted by Secretary General Guterres and supported also by the Italian government, Italy has been actively committed to enhancing the leadership of young people. In this way, in our capacity of partner of UK in the COP26 presidency, we will organize an event entitled dedicated to young people, the Youth for Climate, which will bring together hundreds of girls and boys in Milan from 28 to 30 September 2021 that will share their knowledge and ideas on climate change and present proposals directly to the policymakers and negotiators at the pre-COP. We aim at stimulating ideas, collecting proposals, shaping initiatives, and building bridges between young people and international institutions and processes.
Costruire ponti tra giovani, istituzioni e processi internazionali, tutti insieme.
All together, countries, generations, civil society, center on knowledge and business, we can do it.
Ce la possiamo fare.
Thank you, Gonzalo, for facilitating this session, and distinguished panelists, Paul, Sharan, and Kobie for your constructive comments. Let me also express my gratitude for the many inspiring video messages from representatives from local governments, youth organizations, as well as the Italian government. Personally, appreciating inputs from youth representatives, I applaud Italy for hosting the youth event as a key preparatory event to COP26. Once again, thank you all for your contribution to Session 3.